Now, what starts with the letter C? Cookie starts with C. Let's think of other things that starts with C. Who cares about the other things?
Hi, it's Davina. We're in my kitchen, and I'm gonna finish up this whole thing that I've been on for making sweet desserts for your sweeties for Valentine's Day. And we've already made my family's most infamous chocolate chip cheesecake. We've made a tiramisu layered cake out of boxed pudding. We have turned dark chocolate into scrumptious dark chocolate truffles. But all of those are, well, very fancy, detailed, not homey. And for some people, nothing says love like home-baked cookies. Now, there's a wide variety of cookies, but because Valentine's Day is so closely associated with chocolate, and because there is one cookie that stands out as the chocolate cookie, I'm talking about the chocolate chip cookie. And there's over 1 million recipes out there on how to make the perfect chocolate chip cookie from scratch. Cooking anything from scratch takes, well, having all of the scratch ingredients and the time and the know-how and such to put them all together. I think we're going to cut out a number of middlemen and start with our biscuit baking mix. So let's review what is in a biscuit mix, whether you're using Krusties or Bisquick. Well, it has flour in it. It usually has some buttermilk in it. It usually has some form of powdered oil. Sometimes it's hydrogenated oil. I use coconut oil powder in mine. It usually, but not always, has some form of egg white or egg white substitute. I think it's usually made out of chickpeas or garbanzo beans. It's going to have some sugar. It's also going to have some salt and some baking powder or baking soda and cream of tartar. Baking powder is just basically baking soda and cream of tartar in proper proportions. So that's everything that's in a baking mix. Now, every brand is slightly different. I, of course, like to make my own. But if you were to buy some, here's some things to know. Krusties was made by a bridge club in Seattle sometime in the late 1920s, early 1930s. The company was founded in 1932, and they've messed around with the recipe for a while, but sometime in the mid-40s they settled on what they were going to do, and the company is still operating out of the Kent-Tukwila area of Washington State. So if you're in the Pacific Northwest, you might want to do some Pacific Northwest pride and buy Krusties. Bisquick, which is nationally known, they say was invented around 1930s when one of the General Mills people was on a railroad car and talked to the railroad chef about what the railroad chef was doing, and that guy had been doing it for a number of years, and so the General Mills guy stole the chef's recipe, and in 1931 Bisquick arrived on people's shelves. That's the story that they have. So yeah, Bisquick predates Krusties by like a year-ish. But you know what? They're pretty interchangeable. Bisquick, you usually have to add in an egg, and Krusties you don't. So just look at your baking mix. If you want to use a vegan baking mix, that's just fine. You can usually find them using coconut or palm oil. You can find them without egg in them. You can find them with all vegan ingredients. But you can just buy the mix, and then you won't have to have all of this stuff. You just need one box. Now, I've talked about how the difference between biscuits and scones and muffins and pancakes and waffles and crepes is all about proportions. Well, it's the same now for cookies. Except for instead of just changing the amount of water we have in this, we've got to change some other things. You see, biscuits are not as sweet and are also not as fatty as cookies. So to turn my biscuit mix into cookies, I need to add more sugar and I need to add more oil. Now, I'm not actually going to use white sugar and I'm not going to use coconut oil. I'm going to use brown sugar, which is just molasses mixed into white sugar, and butter, because butter makes it really tasty. Now, there's a little bit of salt in here, but I'm using salted butter because I just find that a little bit of extra salt to offset the sweetness of the chocolate chips is really nice. Also, this molasses will give it a slightly caramely flavor. Oh, and I might want to add in a little bit of vanilla. So this is what I'm going to use for making my recipe. If you've got brown sugar, great, you don't have to do the mixing yourself. This just kind of simplifies things so you don't have as many ingredients running around in your kitchen. All right. So I've got a little bit of pre-mixing to do. If I already had brown sugar, I wouldn't need to do this, but I don't. I have white sugar. You don't technically have to do this if you use white sugar, but I really like the flavor that the molasses brings to the cookies, whether it's in brown sugar form or straight up molasses form. So to make brown sugar out of white sugar, you take 1 cup of white sugar, and if you want dark brown sugar, you put in a tablespoon of molasses. If you want lighter brown sugar, you put in 1 teaspoon to 2 teaspoons of molasses. It is literally January, so you know how slow this is going to be. Now, I'm also going to add in my vanilla at the same time, and no, I'm not going to measure. Yeah, that seems good. There we go. Beautiful brown sugar with vanilla already in it. So now, let's start making our cookies. Here we are at our mixer, and into the mixer we're going to put in 1/4 cup, or about a stick of butter, and our 1 cup brown sugar, or whatever mix you ended up making. Pour in your vanilla too at this time. Start her off slow. You want the butter to be room temperature so it's easier to mix up with the sugar. Once I've gotten that first stick of butter pretty well incorporated with the sugar, I add in my second stick of room temperature butter and start it up again. Now, at this point, it's pretty smooth. I'm not seeing any chunks of butter anymore, but I need to scrape the sides before I add in my dry stuff. Ha ha ha, you sneaky. I got a little chunk of butter right there that needs to be more well incorporated. Now, we're going to add in 2 cups of flour. But I'm going to add them in 1/2 cup at a time. Make sure it's fully blended in, and then the next one. So this is the mix. Remember, this has baking soda in it, or baking powder in it. So as soon as it hits liquid, it's going to start doing its thing. But we do need to make sure that this is fully incorporated in with that butter. So 1/2 cup at a time. we've got our basic cookie dough right here. And it is ready to go if we just wanted to stop with simple cookies, but we've got to add in our chocolate chips. About a cup? Question mark? Yeah, whatever that is. Okay, let's take it over to the other side. Now is the time for us to decide what kind of shape we want our cookies to end up in, and also let's talk a little bit about heating up your oven. You should heat up your oven to 350 degrees. But I will tell you where I discovered this recipe. When I was in college, my dormitory allowed us to have one appliance, either a microwave or a toaster oven, and no refrigerators. They were tired of those little mini fridges getting tossed to the sidewalk every time school year ended. So without a refrigerator, I couldn't use eggs and I couldn't use milk. Well, that's where something like Bisquick or Crusties, where you just add water, was a big benefit, because I didn't need to refrigerate milk and I didn't need to refrigerate any eggs. But let me show you something. There's a big difference in size between an oven and a toaster oven. So I had to modify my recipes. You can't get very many circular cookies in a toaster oven, but you can definitely get more of a blondie brownie sort of thing going if you have the right size Pyrex. So I'm going to split my recipe. I'm going to put part of it into this Pyrex and bake as I used to when I was in college. And I'm going to do the others in a slightly more standard pan. I know some of you saw this and were going, what's going on here? Of course, the typical is you put your rounds onto a baking dish and ta-da, you've got your cookies. However, because this started off with a biscuit mix, these sometimes fluff up more cake cookie-like than crispy cookie-like. So if you happen to have a muffin top pan like I do, where did I find this? Oh, probably the Goodwill. You can totally use something like this to put your cookie dough into, and you will get fluffy, muffin toppy like chocolate chip cookies. Okay, same recipe, different styles of cookies. If you go with like the muffin top or the deep pan, you're gonna wanna double the time. This took about 20 minutes. This took 8 to 10. You're gonna get very different cookies. With 8 to 10 minutes doing the round cookies, let me pick one that's not totally perfect. So you're gonna get a cookie that's got some snap to it. It's gonna be crispy. You're still gonna get the soft chocolate chips on the inside, but it's going to be a crispier cookie. Whereas if you go with the deeper dish, you're going to end up with a softer, chewier, more brownie-like cookie. So if you like brownies or blondies, as this happens to be, you're going to want to do something a little bit thicker like the deeper dish cookie. Otherwise, you can have these nice crisp chocolate chip cookies, which are absolutely delicious. And that's just using a pre-made baking mix. So you don't have to have on hand the baking soda, all of the various different ingredients with dairy and eggs and such. You can just use water, a little bit of extra fat, be it butter or Crisco or coconut, and some extra sugar. You can have wonderful cookies.
Well, I hope I've inspired you to make some sweet treats for the sweethearts in your life.
Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. And I promise we're not always going to be in my kitchen. I've just been on a cooking kick for a while. Art and stories and things like that, I promise, that'll come.